Okay, welcome back. It is 8/2 of 2015. We're going to take a look at Franz Brentano's final book, Aristotle and His Worldview, which he wrote in 1911, transcribed by his wife Emily, because Brentano was blind at the time. It was finally published in English in 1978 by the University of California Press. And we're just going to take a look at the very initial few comments that Brentano makes concerning wisdom and Aristotle's interpretation of wisdom to begin with. He says that within the first moment of being in itself, the divine intellect equals the inherently necessary being, which is the foundation of all finite beings. Divine intellect is the inherently necessary being. So we have being as the backdrop and the enclosure of all finite beings. And the divine intellect is given always to us and existent as object. It's always mediated through object. And our task is to employ Sophia wisdom, which penetrates object in order to acquire nous understanding, to reach the understanding of the inherently necessary being. We need to employ Sophia wisdom. Now, Sophia equals nous, or understanding, with episteme, and episteme is the expertise in interpreting truth as a unity, which we get that's from the Greek term from which we get our English epistemology, or the expertise in interpreting truth. And Sophia, as a concept for wisdom, always contrasts with phronesis, which is just our initial stance of what we suppose to be true. Phronesis is always our supposition of truth. It's our foresight, our intentionality stance toward the true, but we have not yet acquired the true. So initially we want to understand that Aristotle is drawing a distinction between Sophia, wisdom, and phronesis as the initial foresight or stance of intentionality prior to acquiring Sophia wisdom. Now, when we look at the realm of sensate reality, where we have being presented through object, being in general is always the object of presentation for the universality of being as the divine intellect. But if we look at body, if you look at all of the finite objects gathered up within a whole, they still do not equal being in itself. For Aristotle, the body of objects, of all finite objects together, comprise a being kata sumbabadzo, or it's simply finitude being united together as a body, as an organic body. But finitude, gathered together as an organic body, is not equated with being in itself. It still is an expression of object through which being presents itself. Now, according to Brentano, Aristotle gives us three modalities for sensing within the realm of concreto. There's eideon aistheterion, which is individual sensing with a singular organ. There's our koinon aistheterion, which combines organs of sense, like when perceiving motion or rest. And there's a sumbibadzo aistheterion, which is associative sensing. So there's the individual, the communal, and the associative type of perceiving that takes place in the realm of the object of presentation. Now we do form, even at this level, we form generalizations, or what could be called stimulated signs. They're really generalizations, but basically the object of sensing is not the same as the primary external object. The object that stimulates actually equals our sensing object. So we do form concreto stimulated signs for external objects, or basically a generalization type representation. So we're not really reaching a signification of the true, but even at the level of concreto, we do form a topoid type generalization of the sensed object as a concreto stimulated sign, or a concreto stimulated generalization for the external object we are perceiving. So there's some kind of pre-psychical work here. It's concreto, but it's with a little bit of taking up the obliquo slanted type perceiving. There is a way to actually move beyond external object to a stimulated object of a kind of a pre-psychical mode. So we can actually reach defining objects as generalizations, or as what Brentano would call a topoid. But it all begins with the universality of what Aristotle called divine intellect, and that universality expresses itself through object, and that object is being in general. So finitude, even holistic finitude as a sumbabazo body, and even as a holistic organism, it is an object of presentation that presents the universality of the divine intellect. For Aristotle, our task, our goal, is to take up and to implement Sophia wisdom. And Sophia wisdom takes up episteme, which is epistemology, which is the expertise in interpreting the truth as a unity. Truth is a unity for Aristotle. So we take up episteme, epistemology, as this expertise in interpreting truth. So Sophia wisdom includes spiritual discernment. Sophia wisdom possesses the gift of spiritual discernment, of being able to develop an expertise in interpreting spiritual truth of the universality that lies spiritually behind all sensate reality. So Sophia wisdom gets lifted up here and exalted in Aristotle's mind, and within Brentano's mind, who fully aligns himself with Aristotle. So our first understanding of Sophia, according to Aristotle and according to Brentano, it is an exalted wisdom that does include epistemological expertise in interpreting spiritual truth as a unity, and the ability to discern spiritual truth behind all sensate reality that is presented through being in general, through finite being in general, even as an organic collective of a whole. The finitude in general is not equated with the universality. It is merely an expression or a mediation of being in itself. It is being kata sumbabazo, and it mediates being kata autas, or being in itself. But it is simply an organic whole that reflects and mediates the universality of divine intellect. We can perceive that divine universality, we can perceive spiritual universality, spiritual reality, by taking up and acquiring Sophia wisdom. But Sophia wisdom is beyond simple phronesis. Phronesis is our intentionality stance that we take at Aristotle's De Kunta threshold, but phronesis is a intentionality stance. It is on the way towards Sophia wisdom. It is at the De Kunta threshold as an intentionality. So Aristotle is intent on forming a distinction early on between phronesis and Sophia wisdom. Phronesis as an intentionality of a foresight, or a supposed truth, but it passes through episteme as the expertise in interpreting truth and discernment to reach a true Sophia wisdom of understanding the universality of spirit that lies behind all sensate reality. And we begin by the three modalities of perceiving, of using the singular sense, of using communal organs of sense, and then finally through associative sensing. And we will acquire eventually concreto stimulated generalizations for the external objects. Something that Brentano went on to call topoids. That's not necessarily Aristotle's term, but Brentano went on to call these concreto stimulated generalizations, topoids. So we'll close up there, but it gives us a very brief look. We're just kind of launching the study, but it gives us kind of a launch into Brentano's look at Aristotle. And his very first moments are simply to discuss the elevated concept of Sophia wisdom as that which transcends mere phronesis, and that which encloses and lists episteme as the spiritual gift of discernment, the expertise in interpreting truth as a unity.